protection bill is a constitutional, non-compromising bill that criminalizes all abortion. It allows no exceptions because we recognize that abortion is murder. We cannot say abortion is murder but not have consequences for that murder under the law. Otherwise, it's not murder. The term equal protection is taken from the 14th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution. It recognizes that per our U.S. and Maryland constitutions, no person can be deprived of life without due process of the law, and that per our Declaration of Independence, which is organic law, we are created equal, not born equal, and that the very reason government exists is to protect our God-given rights, as Pastor David just said, namely the right to life. By the way, the personhood argument holds no weight because the Declaration itself states that it's a self-evident truth, meaning no need to explain because it's so obvious that we're all created equal. Therefore, this bill acknowledges that the supreme laws of our land and state explicitly requires equal protection under the law for every innocent person, born and unborn. It also acknowledges that courts cannot make law, and therefore Roe v. Wade is not legitimate law and should have been ignored.
Amen.
It and any and all legislation that allows abortion on demand violates natural law and our constitutions in the worst possible way by ruling against the supreme, unalienable, equal rights of the unborn child. So by every moral and constitutional principle of our republic, Roe was a lawless decree and therefore a legal nullity. This is because there is no legal authority in anything that violates our God-given rights. Therefore, this bill is not revolutionary, but restorative. We are simply restoring the equal right to life of the unborn child, that right that has been stolen from them. We understand that equal protection is the only legal roadmap for ending abortion in Maryland. Legitimate law is on our side. We only need to use it. We also understand that incremental legislation throws away our entire legal argument. When we surrender equal protection and believe the lie that we can somehow inch our way to ending abortion, we're actually making matters worse because we falsely legitimize Roe. And when we begin from this standpoint that we already lost, we dig ourselves into a hole we cannot get out of. We believe the last 47 years have proven that. Pro-aborts have moved from safe, legal, rare to celebrating infanticide when a fully developed infant is born because we compromise. And the more we compromise by passing legislation that always ends in, and then you can kill the baby in said fashion at said age, we give strength to this bloody Holocaust. Do-it-yourself abortions are becoming increasingly popular. Every day in Maryland, babies die and are cast into landfills, incineration chambers, and down garbage disposals. Per Planned Parenthood's own annual reports, abortions are steadily increasing, and at least 30,000 unborn Marylanders perish every year under our watch. Many are unaware of this, but in fact, it was incremental legislation that gave us Roe in the first place. Justice Blackmun admitted that, of course, children in the womb are protected under the 14th Amendment if they are persons. But he found Texas to be inconsistent and hypocritical in their argument to the court, because while pro-life legislators argued that the preborn were persons worthy of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, their incremental legislation showed that they did not treat their killing the same as the unlawful killing of born humans. By allowing exceptions to kill the unborn, but not the born, and failing to treat all abortion as murder, the preborn were dehumanized. All of them. Blackmun didn't even have to do the dehumanizing himself. Simply point out that pro-life incremental legislation already dehumanized the preborn by not giving them equal protection. Laws set the people's conscience, and penalties are deterrents. Abortion must be criminalized. There's no other way to end this Holocaust. please help us to raise the standard in Maryland by abandoning incrementalism and embracing equal protection. There's a solid core of us Marylanders that are in this for the long haul. We just need some Wilberforces to take this torch and run with it. Legislators, this is your duty. It's your oath to the Constitution. Thank you. Senator Schiff.
All right. Well, I got to meet some of you guys prior to the event, but since I didn't get to meet everybody, my name is Joseph Silk. I served in the Oklahoma State Senate for 6 years. I just completed my term there. I was elected pretty young, at the age of 27, so I had a little bit of a different perspective than some of the folks up there. I brought my son with me today, Jude. He's my second. Me and my wife Kimberly have 8 kids, and number 9 is on the way. So naturally, we couldn't all come up here. So, but it's an honor to be here, and I've spoken on the phone and had conference calls with Jody and Brenda multiple times, and they are on the right track. And I'll try to keep my remarks fairly brief, and I would encourage you as I go through some of this, if you guys have questions, jot them down, make a mental note, because if we can have a question and answer time, I'd absolutely love that. It will come up to me afterwards. Clearly, I'm not going to spend my time convincing you abortion's morally wrong and flat out unconstitutional, because I think we all agree on that. So instead, I'm just going to give you some inside information into what it actually looks like to run an equal protection bill or a bill of abolition. So in Oklahoma, depending on what part of this country you're from, in Oklahoma it's the abolitionists. That's what they're known as. Up here it's equal protection. And both bills are the same, both ideas. But I hope what I have to tell you helps you in your fight here in Maryland. And there's very different demographics, and I understand that. We can discuss that later. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the difference between pro-life and equal protection, because there is a huge, monumental difference. And if you take nothing, that's probably the most important thing you'll take away from this is a thorough understanding. And the more you think about it, the more it's gonna kind of come in. And then I want to talk about how we have to change our way of thinking about how to address the abortion issue. Even those of us who have been involved in equal protection and abolition legislation for a long time, even myself, even after doing this for 5 years, I catch myself sometimes, and we really have to change our way of thinking on that. And then the third thing that I want to talk to you guys about is common objections. So objections that you are going to come into as you push this in the legislature, or as you push this in public, or as you go to churches or anything like that. Some common objections and the reality behind them. Those are the 3 things I want to talk about. Firstly, the pro-life versus equal protection is huge. And you did a great job just now talking about it. And I'll kind of sum it up or kind of piggyback on what you said. The pro-life movement has been a complete failure since Roe v. Wade. That's all there is to it. We have absolutely, utterly failed and not made one single step forward. We have actually made the problem exceptionally worse. The first thing we have to do is realize that we have done it completely wrong, mainly because it was not biblical and it was not constitutional the way we've been doing it. So, in Oklahoma, for example, if Roe v. Wade was overturned today, in Oklahoma, which they say is one of the most pro-life states in the union, if Roe v. Wade was overturned today, abortion would still be legal in Oklahoma. Why? Because of pro-life legislation. Because of all of the pro-life laws that we have placed on the books, they have created legal avenues on how you can kill your child. So even if Roe v. Wade was overturned, Oklahoma, abortion would continue without a hitch. So some of the bills that you've heard about across the nation that are victories for the pro-life organizations, and we're talking National Right to Life, we're talking the big pro-life organizations celebrate these as victories when they have states like Oklahoma or Mississippi or Kansas pass them, and they're not. For example, how about the Down syndrome bill? If you're tested, the pregnant woman's tested and the baby is tested to have Down syndrome, you can't kill your baby if it has Down syndrome. But if it doesn't have Down syndrome, you're good to go ahead and go kill your baby. It's very, very sick when you put it that way. But that is what we're, as pro-life people, they're like, that's a victory. We did that. No, that's not a victory at all. that's making it worse. And I'll follow up a little bit on what she said about how that actually makes it a lot worse. The pain capable bill, that was a recent one. You know, you can't kill your baby if it's old enough to feel pain, or you can't kill it in a way where it can feel pain. But if it's young enough where it can't, or you can figure out how to do it when it doesn't feel pain, then you can go ahead and kill it. It makes absolutely zero sense. One of the most sickening ones, or two of them, is the ultrasound bill. That was a big one. Well, let's pass legislation that says if a woman wants to go have an abortion, she has to view an ultrasound first. Then once she sees a picture of her baby, then she can kill it. How demented is that? And these are the pro-life victories that they've said. The 3-day waiting period, which actually just got struck down in Oklahoma. If you want to have an abortion, you have to say you want to have an abortion, then you have to meditate on it for 3 days. So basically, once you premeditate it, then you're good to go. This is what our pro-life movements have gotten us, is bills like this. And they're still doing it. And I just say that to a lot of people. No, that's not true. That can't be true. Call your local national right to life representative and talk to them about it. And they're going to be like, oh no, those are victories because of this or this. Or call Abby Johnson, who charges like $10,000 at a speaking event. She's for these bills. She will absolutely oppose equal protection bills and bills of abolition. And that's just the reality of it. And I've already talked about how and that's just in Oklahoma. A lot of people are like, well, you got to overturn Roe v. Wade, you got to chip away at it, and little baby steps. No, those little baby steps are actually creating paths to kill your baby. Basically, when, where, and how. That's all they do. That is all regulatory, incremental pro-life do, and pro-life legislation does. We've got to completely turn away from it. And it's really sad to think about how many hundreds of millions of dollars have been donated to pro-life organizations, and how many thousands of volunteers they've had, yet abortions are on the rise. Like you say, abortions are on the rise, even in places like Oklahoma. And the reason that is because their goal was never to end abortion. It never was. And I have had he was the vice president of the Oklahoma National Right to Life in my office multiple times. And I've asked him point blank, do you think abortion is murder? And he will not say that it is. Because they don't think it is. And that, of course, we haven't ended abortion because that was never the goal under their leadership. So those are pro-life legislation. That's pro-life legislation. That's a pro-life movement. Now, equal protection or abolition basically hinges on three things, and you did a great job identifying it. But really, what it comes down to is life begins at the moment of fertilization. This is what an equal protection bill says. Life begins at the moment of fertilization. If you intentionally kill that life, it is considered murder. It's equal. It's consistent with other murder statutes. And if any court says otherwise, that court opinion, because that's what it is, it's an opinion, it's not law, is null and void. That's it. Those are the three aspects of an equal protection bill. When I go to Oklahoma, I can pull 10 people off the street. Nine of them are going to agree with me. They're like, I thought that's what we were doing the whole time. And that's really what they thought. That they really think that abortion's murder. But those are the two huge differences between pro-life and equal protection. Now, saying that, even like I said, so moving on number 2 here, we have to change the way that we're thinking about this, because every once in a while I'll try to come up with some kind of legal, how do we legally slip through this or slip through that, and we can't do it. We just have to, because it all goes back to the Roe v. Wade opinion. That's got to be ignored by a state. That's all there is to it. That is the only way that you will end abortion, is to treat that opinion as completely null and void. The courts have a purpose. I am not anti-judicial system. When there's pieces of legislation when it comes to taxes or education or whatever it may be, that's fine. Let's get their opinion on it if you want. They do have a purpose. However, the U.S. Supreme Court or the Maryland State Supreme Court or any other Supreme Court, any court out there, no court, no judge has the authority to authorize the killing of innocent children. They don't. And if they say they do, or if they offer that opinion, they're flat out wrong, and the state government, the Senate, the representatives, and the governor need to flat out ignore them and enforce the Constitution, which clearly identifies everybody has a right to life. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which a lot of you are familiar with, he was a pastor and theologian during World War II. He died in the Flossenburg concentration camp. He was talking about Nazi Germany, but he said, we're not simply to bandage the wounds of the victims of injustice, we're to drive the spoke into the wheel itself. And that's the problem, is the pro-life movement, a lot of our churches, and we've just been bandaging the wounds of the injustice. But we need to follow Dietrich Bonhoeffer's lead here and actually drive a spoke in it and end it. So, moving on to lastly is basically the common objections that you're going to find, and this is key, because so many times people agree, yes, I agree with abolition, I agree with equal protection, everything that this bill says, but then they run into pretty fierce objections, and you will. You're going to run into three people who are going to object to equal protection bills, and I've run a bill of abolition for 5 years in the Oklahoma State Senate. Oklahoma, again, there's 48 state senators, 40 of them are Republican. Supposedly the most pro-life state in the union. The Oklahoma Baptists basically rule the entire state. We're talking very evangelical, conservative. I live there for a reason, right? However, the three groups that you're going to run into that oppose equal protection with everything they have is, one, your large church organizations. So in Oklahoma, it was the Catholics and the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma. I had the executive leadership in my office multiple times. They were not good meetings. They don't like that because it's too radical. It's not nice. I know, it's crazy. But you will run into that, including pastors. Some pastors aren't going to like it. I know they've got a lot of pastors in here tonight, don't we? Yeah. A lot of pastors. You're going to go talk to some of your pastor colleagues, they're not going to like it. Bottom line is, if they preach this from the pulpit, they're going to lose tithe dollars. That's all there is to it. The best story I have on that, I had a good friend of mine. Our families are friends. He was a pastor at a church for 10 years. It was one of the bigger churches in rural Oklahoma. There was a couple hundred people or something like that. And he said, hey, I want you to come and I want you to talk to the church about the difference between pro-life and abolition, or pro-life and equal protection, as you guys call it. And I said, that's great, I'll do it. So he announced it to the church. The board got very, very mad, said, no, we cannot have that spoken about in the church. And he said, well, I'm going to have him come anyway. So I came. Half the church didn't show up. That was on Sunday evening. On Monday, the board convened and fired him. Wow. He put up flyers about an abolition rally at the Capitol. The board came and ripped the flyers down. Because they're not appealing to everyone. So you're going to deal with that. And I've got endless stories. The other one you're going to run into is pro-life organizations. They're going to say this is going to set us behind all the work that we've done. This is the worst thing that we could do. Call Abby Johnson and have her come speak at a equal protection rally and offer her $10,000. She still won't come. This is contrary to what they truly believe. They don't believe abortion's murder. They believe that the Supreme Court has the authority to say it's okay to kill your baby. And the last one is the Republican Party. So the Republican Party's not going to like it either, because it's not nice enough. It's going to come across way too radical, way too conservative. And like I said, in Oklahoma, I had huge fights with leadership. I mean, if there was a state that should be able to pass an equal protection bill, it was Oklahoma. And I've spoken to multiple different states, and all of them say, why didn't you guys do it? And I'm like, well, yeah. So you're going to run into those three people. Now, specifically on the bill, you'll hear abolition or equal protection is unconstitutional. Again, we've already addressed that. All you got to do is say, how do you figure? They usually go back to, well, Roe v. Wade said that, Roe v. Wade also once ruled that black people were private property and had no rights. So if we were alive at the time, where would we have been on that stance? Sadly, a lot of pastors and legislators I know would have been on the side of keeping slavery legal. That's just all there is to it. They would have fallen in line with some Supreme Court opinions and gone from there. So, and a good example that's kind of been, marijuana's crazy. I obviously don't support it, but it's actually been a little bit of a blessing in disguise because it's given me some great arguing points. Because in 2010, in Gonzalez versus Reich, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that states could not distribute marijuana. And it was actually against federal law. It was upholding a federal law about marijuana. you know how many states are distributing marijuana? All over, including Oklahoma, what's happening? Nothing. There's marijuana dispensaries and grow houses all over the place because the Supreme Court can't say that. They can do whatever they want, whether you like it or not. And so I'm like, so if you're going to be on, and I argued with the president pro tem of the Senate in a committee meeting on this bill, and he just didn't have anything to say. And he's like, well, we can't do this because the Supreme Court said. And I was like, well, under your watch, we're distributing marijuana. And that was against Supreme Court ruling. So you can use that. Abolition calls for secession or equal protection. Again, equal protection is a secessionist idea and, wanting to peel off from the Union. Nowhere in your bill, what's your bill? What's the bill number? Does it have a bill
We don't
number
have a number yet.
Not a number yet. But that bill, nowhere in the language calls for seceding from the Union, and neither did mine. That's just a scare tactic. Abolition will put, or equal protection will put all mothers who have an abortion in prison. That's not true either. So the way these bills are written is it just makes murder equal across the board. So the example I give is if a young woman has an abusive boyfriend, gets pregnant, the boyfriend forces her to have an abortion, right, against her will, do you think that a court is going to put her in prison? No. The court will show leniency just like they do in all other circumstances. Are they going to put the doctor and the boyfriend in prison? Probably, as they should forever. They should. However, 35, 36-year-old career woman, right? She's going to lose her promotion if she keeps this baby. She goes and kills the baby. Are they going to put her in prison? Probably, as they should. So that's up to the judicial system. All we're saying is murder statutes, homicide statutes need to be enforced equally. Equal protection does not allow for mother's life to be saved in the pregnancy if the pregnancy is dangerous. So that's probably the biggest one. That's the one that the churches and the pro-life organizations are going to throw out. You can't enforce this equally because there's no exception to save the life of the mother. That's not true either, because what an equal protection bill does is it just says it charges doctors to treat all lives equally. So if there's a car accident and a mom and her 2-year-old children come to the emergency room, that ER doctor is just going to do everything he can to keep both of those people alive. And if he doesn't succeed and he only ends up saving the mother, you think he's going to get in trouble? No. Basic medical triage. So in Oklahoma, I actually took language from the medical statutes and I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says doctors aren't going to be prosecuted or held liable as long as they've exhausted all of their medical resources to save, everybody involved. Because right now they're not. They're actually intentionally killing. So it's not going to put women in danger. It absolutely will not. Equal protection bill would create backroom and unsafe abortions. I have a hard time not laughing at that one. Because murders that take place like in the alleyways are kind of unsafe. But we still make murders illegal. So yeah, is there going to be some bad things that happen? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to make it illegal. So, but that one, I've heard that one a lot. We need to overturn Roe v. Wade first. You'll hear that a lot. We need to overturn Roe v. Wade first. That comes from the pro-life movement. Now, here's the problem. There's a group of law professors in Louisiana who've gotten together several times, and they've said, and you alluded to this, they say if you want to overturn Roe v. Wade, which I think Roe v. Wade needs to be flat out ignored, right. But if your goal is to overturn Roe v. Wade, the only way you're going to do it is through an equal protection bill, because most pro-life bills get struck down because they're not equal. They're highly discriminatory. And so even the Supreme Court's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And that's how we got here in the first place. So, but what's crazy about that is the pro-life movement says we've got to overturn Roe v. Wade first. Yet they will not support legislation that is needed to overturn Roe v. Wade. Complete hypocrisy. So those are some of your common objections. Now, and I'll finish with where the movement's gone, because it's good to kind of get an idea of what's happening nationwide. So in 2016, Senate Bill 1118 was the first bill. I filed the first bill of abolition or equal protection in the nation. In 2016, that was not that long ago. And it was just me and like 2 or 3 other guys. And we were kind of crazies, right? In 4 years' time, at the end of next year, there's going to be 9 states who have filed equal protection bills. In Oklahoma specifically, the large church organization that says nobody could, fight against, that organization is almost split down the middle because the executive level Baptists came out and said, we're not going to support this. The majority of the churches said, are you crazy? So there's about to be a change in Oklahoma Baptist General Convention leadership. The Catholics are really struggling to stick together on this as well. And so you've got all over, so in my state, it's going like wildfire. We went from having a couple hundred people at the Capitol in 2017 to like 5,000 people at the Capitol in 2020, that was earlier this year. Now, we still haven't passed the bill, but for a movement to spread that fast, it's crazy. Talked to people in Florida, Wisconsin, in Arizona. There was a freshman class of House of Representatives elected. He's an Army veteran, 21-year tank operator, and he is 100% on board. And I talked to him about all this stuff, and he wasn't surprised at all. He's like, yeah, I could see that. I could see that pushback coming. So they're going to get it going as well. So nationwide, it's moving. In individual states, it's moving. And so I hope you can kind of grasp that, the huge difference between abolition and equal protection, because it's massive. Where your objections are going to come from, always remember to keep changing your way of thinking, because you will find, well, what if we do this to kind of, get around the Supreme Court? No, it's just got to be flat out ignored. And I know it does seem like a impossible feat. And I'll say this on the movement also. In Oklahoma, there was 2 8-year incumbent senators who got beat in the primary because they voted against my abolition bill, and their opponent was for abolition. And we know incumbents don't get beat, right? Especially when you've been out there. And there was hundreds of thousands of dollars put in to keep them in office, and they got beat. So next year, even though I'm not in the Senate, there's going to be another equal protection bill put forward. So, there's multiple statistics that talk about how the younger generation views abortion, and it's becoming less popular because of medical technologies and all. And I think it's more than that. I think God plays a role in everything, and young people are much more receptive to the idea of, hey, this is an actual life, and if we take this and say it's not murder, then we're just complete hypocrites. And so we have that going for us. And we got to keep in mind that the God we serve, He orders everything. And just look at the stories of, Noah and Moses and Joseph and David in the Old Testament. And actually, and more recently, the Revolutionary War, right? These guys, we weren't supposed to, how could you beat Britain, a world superpower at the time? But we did. People would have thought that ending slavery was completely never going to happen, but it did. World War II. Nobody's going to stop the Nazi war machine, right? But it was stopped. So that's where we're at. You talked about a historic moment. This is the next few years will be very historic regarding this front. So I think if the church comes together, if the small remnant actually gets active and goes for it, we'll absolutely do it. And another one of my favorite quotes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he went on to say, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. So that concludes my remarks. Do you want me to open it up for questions? Please. So questions, yes.
Delegate Rick Metzger, thank you so much for such an informative. A couple of things I'd like to share or ask. You mentioned if the Roe versus Wade was null and void, what would that mean for the states? Kind of go back to when it used to be?
Yeah, so it depends on what laws your state has in place. So if Roe v. Wade was overturned, Oklahoma would have a lot of work to do repealing all the pro-life laws. Right. Now Maryland, I don't know how many pro-life laws you have on the books, but it's probably none of the abortions happening today do not hinge on Roe v. Wade.
Right.
They hinge on pro-life.
So just to follow up on that, the heartbeat bill, I put it in for a couple of years, and this past year we kind of pulled it, but my aggravation was that the Right to Life folks, they said they would support it, be there 100% to testify. The Catholic Church said, we'll be there, we'll support that 100%, we'll be there. Crisis Pregnancy Center said that when I come to the bill hearing, I looked around and there was all the opposition, but there was no support. But the letters came, we support this effort, we endorse this effort. And my thinking was, because I was very defeated when I went home, and I need to share this. I was very defeated when I went home. And my wife, minister's daughter, I said I felt like I was swimming uphill with salmons. And she said, Rick, you spoke for the unborn, and you spoke that had no voice. And my thought was, my goodness, if you take these fundraising opportunities away, and if there's, no more abortion, so
Right.
why do we need them?
Right.
And my challenge was, are we going to get behind this? Is people really going to support the effort that we want to do?
Right.
And that's my challenge.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that is very true. When you look at the millions of dollars that are pumped into these pro-life organizations, that's not the only reason why they will not support an equal protection bill. But that's got to be one of them. Because you're right, if abortion is criminalized across the board, we're not going to need pro-life organizations anymore. Now, my thinking is they need to transfer into helping young families and pregnant women who don't have the means to take care of the baby and stuff like that. There's going to be a huge need for that. But you're right, they're not going to do. So my first bill that I authored before I really grasped the difference was a pain capable bill, and I got it from Kansas law. I beefed it up a little bit, and I was like, this is awesome. It was my first year up there. So you got a 27-year-old freshman state senator who's running the pain capable bill, getting into the social issues kind of deal, right? And Tony Lowinger, who was, again, the vice president of National Right to Life and the director of Oklahomans for Life, he came to my office, he's like, well, we're not going to support this because it's a little aggressive. And I was like, a little aggressive. And then it was shortly after that I was like, wait, even that is completely wrong. But they will. They will absolutely not support it.
So I was interested in your incremental approach and how obviously common sense says that. But we see you got to look at the cause and effect, because not only is the one side incremental, but the other side as well. And what I mean by that is, if the government gets to decide that it can kill children, then there's a day in the future that it can decide who's essential and non-essential.
Right.
So we're there.
Assisted suicide.
Yeah.
So I want to link this in a cause and effect. So instead of taking care of the splinter, we got to go after the sucking chest wound.
Right.
And we got to take this back to the root. And again, until we solve this, all the other poisons are going to occur, and we're just peeing in the wind, my friends.
Very true.
So this is what makes this issue so important. Because again, if we can kill babies, then we can decide, the government can, who's important and who's not.
Assisted suicide.
Right.
Assisted suicide, we see that. We see that today from Governor Hogan, who's essential, who can open. These are real-time things that occur because of these events.
Who refused to veto
Well,
the abortion
I
funding
think
bill.
a lot of people are starting to see that. So you think Nazi Germany, it wasn't that one day Jews are being marched off to the concentration camps. It started little. It was, you can't sit on the public benches. And they complied. And then it was like, well, you can't do this. And they complied. And then, what 11 million Jews murdered? So it went from something little. So you're exactly right on that.
I'm Catherine Adelaide. I'm on the Carroll County Republican Central Committee. I ran as an openly pro-life candidate because I didn't have I didn't know any better. So I asked for prayer for our MDGOP convention. My mission is to make life the #1 political priority. I basically try to teach people there are only 2 political priorities, preborn and postborn. And it is a constant battle with the Republicans, with the Christians, with the churches. I don't have to worry about the Democrats. Feminist for life is now, women deserve better. But it's the churches and the Christians and the Republicans.
Yeah.
And this is a no-brainer. I did the first unanimous resolution against abortion funding. Never in the history of the MDGOP. They were like, well, yeah, okay, we don't want to pay for it. And we took it all the way, including Defend Life. We had, Dan Cox was here, we did the Maryland caucus. I got a resolution from the MFRW and from the MDGOP. We went to Hogan because we knew that he made a deal with the devil to get his first term and to get his second term. And the one thing he would never touch is abortion. That's the golden calf of America. So I knew he was in a corner. So I said, I'm going to get the entire Republican Party to say, so he can go, hey, listen, guys, I know I promised you, but I am a Republican. I got the whole party. So I'm going to veto this abortion bill, and you can pass it. You can override me. And he wouldn't do it. So if somebody said 30,000, his decision added 9,000 more babies will be murdered because their mothers are being given free abortions. He should not receive one vote, 1 ounce of Republican money. But people forget. And they're just trying to pass things that you can't badmouth a fellow Republican. I'm like, if they're murdering babies, I certainly will. And you can throw me off the Central Committee.
Right.
But I've put a resolution against infanticide because we are crossing over from late-term abortion into infanticide. So I pray that, again, it's a no-brainer. I was publicly humiliated because I didn't go through the resolutions committee, which is the censorship committee. But enough people got on the chair and he came back around. And that went out, and we had people show up that was pulled from a hearing. So this was to enshrine into our Constitution. And it had a nasty gun rider on it, too, a nasty Second Amendment gun rider on it. And because 100 patriots, including this fine constitutional pastor here, showed up, that bill was pulled. We've beaten it for 2 years in a row. But again, it's pathetic. We're fighting this when we should be abolishing it. So I'm very happy to see this at last. I'm 100% before it. I don't want to hear, well, it can't pass. Nothing, just because it can't pass doesn't mean it should be in there. We need to be doing 100 times more. My second question is, or any question, why hasn't one state ever stood up against Roe? Have you heard of the doctrine of the lesser magistrates?
Yeah, I'm good friends with the author.
So because I'm elected, I said, I'm going to do whatever I can to stop it. And when I heard this, I have a law degree. I'm like, we've been sold the greatest legal fiction ever.
Yeah.
In law school, too.
Right.
How is it, when I heard this, I said, how is it possible that not one state, that not one governor ever stood up to Roe in 50 years? That's my question.
My very simple answer, and I don't want to offend, how many legislators are here? Okay. I don't want to offend any of my legislator friends here. Legislators are very weak individuals. That's just all there is to it. And I'm talking about my colleague.
What about the
So
governors?
in Oklahoma, do what?
What about the governors?
Right, they're worse.
Well, they're elected too.
And I'm talking about, so in Oklahoma, you got 48 state senators. 40 of them are Republicans that campaign on being pro-life. And when I made a motion to bring Senate Bill 13, which was the Equal Protection Bill, just to make it eligible to be heard, it was not a vote on the bill, it was just eligible to be heard. Like, let's discuss it and deliberate it and amend it if anybody's got good ideas. 4 voted yes. 4. And it's because they are very, very weak, corrupt, hypocritical individuals. I'm actually going to talk about legislators later on this evening, but that's what it is.
Well, that's why people don't believe it. When you hear this, you go, how could not one of them? In fact, had this bill 664, which is just 2 away from 666, had it would have passed as a bill, then gone on as a constitutional on the ballot. It would have been passed because people are so stupid. It was a protection from government intrusion. The libertarians were for it. Nobody knew what it was about because they didn't call it infanticide. Maryland Right to Life wouldn't let me. I was able to call it infanticide.
Right.
Had that passed, this bill wouldn't get its foot through the front door because your staff, your staffers would have said, "Oh, it's constitutional. We're going to pre-review it, and we're not going to let it would deregulate the whole industry, which might be a good thing, and it wouldn't let an abolition bill get through the front door.
Right.
Then you've got to go to court and fight liberal judges for the next 100 years.
Right.
So we're talking a civil war.
No, I know, and that's why in one of my very tense meetings with leadership, I had the pro tem and the floor leader. We had a meeting in their office, and they were like, we went over the bill. They had their constitutional lawyers there, which never opened their mouth. And they asked me, they said, "Are you trying to start a civil war?" I said, "No, I'm trying to prevent a civil war. Just if you would uphold the Constitution, that would be much better." And that's all this. And they didn't have anything to say. But you're right. The big question is, why has nobody done this yet? Mainly because politicians, the majority of them, and again, I don't know you guys personally, but you could be amazing. Because in Oklahoma, there are like 4 that are very solid, constitutionally minded, up there for the right reason. You guys may be the ones that are here from Maryland. I don't know. But the vast majority are not. They're absolutely not. So that's number one reason why. And then the second reason why is everybody has looked to the pro-life movement for leadership, and they're just kind of following their what they're giving out to people. and it's absolutely not what we need
So
to
what
do.
we hear in Maryland is, I can't say, oh, I'm pro-life. I said, where is it on your palm card? Why aren't you talking? Oh, because I can't get elected. And I need people to be responded, say, if you won't stand up for pro-life before you get elected, I don't believe you're going to stand up for it
Right.
after you're elected, because
That's
you've
right.
already compromised yourself. You're compromised.
Very good. And even, yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, so I came in late, I apologize. I think quite a few of us may have come in a little bit late at the end of your talk. Very excellent, very intriguing, but could you give us a synopsis of the abolition versus equal protection? It seems like you were differentiating the two.
yes, so I'll do it real quick.
And
Yeah.
after that, we need to break for
Maybe do a 3-minute synopsis.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that in 2 minutes, and then he said we need a break for eating, so we'll do that. So yeah, so up until now, pro-life legislation has kind of been the go-to legislation. That's what the pro-life organizations are raising money and presenting these bills to legislators, and they're coming back and saying here was a victory. And pro-life legislation never sought to end abortion. It just said Roe v. Wade was, we just have to comply with Roe v. Wade. So what it does is, they'll offer the Down syndrome bill, which means you can't kill your baby if it's diagnosed with Down syndrome. But if it doesn't have Down syndrome, you can kill it. The ultrasound bill, you can't kill your baby until after you see a picture of it. But once you see a picture of it, you can kill it. You have to have hospital admittance privileges. As long as you're good to go in hospital, you can kill it. The 3-day waiting period, you can't kill your baby unless you wait 3 days until you premeditate it. Once you premeditate it, then you're good to go. So it's when, where, and how. And what that those pro-life bills have done is set up avenues to how you can kill your baby. An equal protection bill says life begins at the moment of fertilization. We're going to apply and the intentional taking of that life at any phase is classified as a murder. So we're going to apply the murder statutes equally. And then if any court says otherwise, that is null and void. They don't have the authority to authorize the killing of innocent children. And it's so important to know the difference, because like I said right before y'all got here, in Oklahoma, which is one of the most pro-life states in the union, if Roe v. Wade was overturned today, abortion would still be legal in Oklahoma because of the pro-life bills. So what we've got to get ingrained in our head is any bill that does anything other than completely abolish abortion and provide equal protection is more detrimental than pro-choice legislation. That's how bad it is. So I'll turn it over to you, and I'll be here after if y'all want to.
So at this time, I'm just going to simply say it's time to eat. Thank you.